who's willing to drive down from Sandpoint or Bonners Ferry may also use our facility and check out any materials. So these are in our library, and I'm sure they're in some of the local public libraries too.
But Denise, people that will be on our area, Northern Idaho, you belong to an interlibrary loan, so they could actually get books from their library through you. If it's something we have, they don't have.
Absolutely, yeah.
And in other places, people can be encouraged to go to their local library.
Oh, absolutely. And most of these books are very popular and quite common, and they're, I'm sure, easy to find.
So the people we've been talking about, the authors we've been talking about, the books we've been talking about. Virginia, my question for you is, how do you encourage people to go about selecting the kinds of books they want to read? How do you find out, if you have a particular interest within the fiction area, how do you find the best books within that area?
Oh, that's a tough question. I'm always on the alert for books. I read book reviews everywhere. I listen to friends like Denise who said, have you read? The first place I hit when I go into a library, and I do all of the local ones, is the new book section. And I have some favorite authors. I go there. I have read some reviews, and sometimes I have to admit I look at the covers, and if they're intriguing, I will read the first few pages and decide if I want to go there or not. And of course, in many libraries, they're sectionalized, like they put all the mysteries in one section, they put all the westerns in one section. Of course, they put the biographies if you're interested in that. I really encourage shelf browsing. I just think there's nothing like it, because you might have your mind set, but you'd better be open-minded when you go into a library, or a bookstore for that matter. I love to prowl. I go to thrift stores. I prowl their bookshelves. I see what they have. That's a real challenge because nothing's ordered there. You have to just look at everything. So
Those are the kinds of ways that you can go. Now, Denise, did you bring another book that you've not yet reviewed?
No, I don't think so. I think I have.
So you've talked about all the books that you brought.
I have.
But
I have.
But you had some favorites that you haven't brought with you this year.
Well, yes.
And
in fact, I had a list of books I'd read over the summer, like On Chesil Beach, which is Ian McEwan's new novel, and I thought, I'll take that one. I'll take Hilma Wolitzer's Summer Reading. I'll take that one. There were at least 4 of them. They were all checked out. I thought, well, great. That was exciting to see that everything I had, read this summer and had chosen to discuss was all off the shelf.
So that's to let our viewers know that there are many more good books out there for them to explore and find out about.
You bet.
We have a short time left, Virginia, and both of you have mentioned today that even though these books are identified as fiction, but in some of the cases, one book there was a mixture of fiction and nonfiction, but even those that are put forth as fiction are often based upon a real life experience. But what do? They have to they create more characters, or they represent those characters in fiction because they probably did not discuss with them this whole process, or they weren't in their lifetime.
They couldn't have. And The Widow of the South, of course, there's no way that Robert Hicks could have known these characters, but had to imagine them all. Another book by Geraldine Brooks that both Denise and I have read is called The March, which is her account of what happened to the father in Little Women, Mr. March. And he went to the Civil War. And so as a result of reading that book, I went back and read Little Women, which I have to tell you was quite different. I told Denise about this, and she says, I'm not going to read it again because I like it the way it was when I read it when I was young. And it was pretty interesting to go back after, I think I read it when I was in junior high or high school, and to read it again as an adult. And of course, the story, The March, about Sherman's March to the Sea, is also about Mr. March. And again, based on fact, but also another piece of fiction woven in, taken on by Louisa May Alcott's Little Women, and then what was imagined by Geraldine Brooks in that instance, what happened to him.
Authors that do fiction have to have great imagination than those who write nonfiction, because they have to create all these characters that are based on research and history. They're very imaginative. With that, our time is up, and I want to say to Dr. Virginia Tinsley Johnson and Denise Clark, not only are you wonderful, wonderful friends, but you are tremendous contributors to this institution and the community. And I was very serious when I said you're true intellects, and not only with your background in education, but your real love for reading, and it expands knowledge all the time, and I've certainly seen that in you. The good news, ladies and gentlemen, is that our two guests will be back again next week, and next week our program is on nonfiction books, and they will share with you some of their very favorites. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station. Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
Welcome to the Public Forum. For our viewers who have not been with us over a very long period of time, we have a tradition every fall to do two programs, one on books of fiction and one on nonfiction. We have our same guests back every year, two of my dear friends that are colleagues at North Idaho College, and as I said last week, two people of a great intellect, and they read constantly. And last week with our guests, we dealt with their recommendation of what they'd read this summer on fiction. Today we will talk about nonfiction books. And I first of all welcome to the program Dr. Virginia Tinsley Johnson, our dear friend. She is the chair of the Division of Communication, Fine Arts, and Humanities. She holds a baccalaureate degree in English from the College of Idaho. She holds a degree in English and a master's from the University of Idaho, and her doctorate of arts is in English from Idaho State University, and she also is the vice chair of the Idaho Humanities Council. Virginia, welcome back. It's a delight always to have you on the program.
Thank you, Tony. This is one of my favorite programs to be on, too, and to watch.
Well, thank you so much. And equally, I want to welcome our good friend Denise Clark, who is North Idaho College librarian, and like her colleague Virginia, reads constantly. She holds a baccalaureate degree from Michigan State University in Theater Arts and English, and she has a master's from Western Michigan University in Library Science. And Denise is also, as like Virginia, they've also been great performers on the Chautauqua format at North Idaho College on our lecture series, and they've played great characters. Welcome again to the program.
Thank you, Tony.
And as always, I welcome Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, as our panelist, and she will start today's questioning.
The field of nonfiction is very broad because there are biographies and there are other kinds of books that are more commentaries and so forth. So let's start with you this time, Virginia. Can you tell us one of the books that was most intriguing that you read recently?
Okay. I think I'm going to pick this book, which was recommended by several friends. It's called 3 Cups of Tea, and it's written by Greg Mortensen. It's subtitle, One Man's Mission to Promote Peace One School at a Time. And Greg Mortensen is now based in Montana, interestingly enough, with his foundation that he's established. 3 Cups of Tea is the time that it takes to actually, in the Mideast where he was and where he has been doing his work in Pakistan and Afghanistan, to actually talk to someone and to work a deal or to settle a situation down. So he is warned fairly early in the story that it's, you don't just have 1 cup of tea, it's 3 cups. So you have to have a little chit-chat, you have to make friends, you have to understand the other person. Greg Mortensen was coming down as a mountain climber from K2, and he had not been able to ascend all the way to the summit because he was called back to help save someone there. And he got lost coming back down the mountain, and he stumbled into this village in Pakistan, and he met one of the village elders, and he became really intrigued with the fact that there are very few schools out in these nether parts of Pakistan and later in Afghanistan. And he set about making a promise that he would return to that village and he would build schools, especially for girls. And so this is the account of how he has one school at a time, with help from all kinds of foundations and individuals sending in $5 here and there, built these schools, and had to know the culture. He's really savvy about languages, so he picked up on some of those, and so he helped to build all these schools. And the passage that I chose here to read from is about one of the village elders in one of these villages who he is meeting and talking to, and there's been a little highfalutin dealings going on from another village elder in another village who comes and demands this sacrifice of a goat that they've had to give. They were having a big celebration at the end of the school, and another kind of warlord came in and took it away. And so Mortenson describes what's going on after that, and he says, after dark, by the light of the fire that smoldered in his balti, Haji Ali, who is the elder, beckoned Mortenson to sit beside him. He picked up his dog-eared, grease-spotted Koran and held it before the flames. Do you see how beautiful this Koran is? Haji Ali asked. Yes. I can't read it, he said. I can't read anything. This is the greatest sadness in my life. I'll do anything so the children of my village never have to know this feeling. I'll pay any price so they have the education they deserve. Sitting there beside him, Mortenson says, I realized that everything, all the difficulties I'd gone through from the time I'd promised to build a school to the long struggle to complete it, was nothing compared to the sacrifices he was prepared to make for his people. Here was this illiterate man who hardly ever left his little village in Karakoram, Mortenson says, yet he was the wisest man I've ever met.
And Denise, how about a book that you read that you enjoyed?
I have to share this one. It's called Little Heathens, Hard Times and High Spirits on an Iowa Farm During the Great Depression. Now, I bought this book for my sister for her birthday. My sister and I both grew up on dairy farm. We grew up on dairy farms in Michigan in the 1950s, and I didn't think there was a whole lot of difference between growing up on a dairy farm in Iowa during the Great Depression and growing up on one in Michigan in the 1950s.
I can identify with that.
Yeah. And I was, everyone thinks of the Great Depression as this horrible experience, and it was. For many, many, many people, it was a horrible experience. And to have someone write about a delightful time growing up during the Great Depression, I thought would be well worth reading, and it was. It's full of family tales and family recipes and these making do, hard scrabble people who saved every scrap of anything and recycled it to a fare thee well. And the stoic demeanor of her relatives. They were Bible-thumping Methodists. They brook no nonsense from children, and they displayed little affection, though it became obvious that they made room for their granddaughter, their daughter and her children. She had been abandoned, their daughter had been abandoned, Mildred Kalish's mother, by her husband. And so they returned to the family farm, and she raised her daughters and her sons there. And one of the most telling, I think, moments in the book that I really enjoyed was she's talking about, and she's surrounded by aunts and uncles and cousins. I mean, this is a big extended family. And she talks about her uncle has sent his son, her cousin, off to World War II, off to the war. And so when her cousin comes home, he survives the war. He comes home, his father is there at the railway station to meet him as he gets off the train. And the father walks up to his son and places his two hands on his son's shoulders and looks him in the eye and says, "Son, I never thought I'd see you again." And that was it. That was the end of it. They were off, off home. I mean, that was the extent of the emotion, that these people were comfortable showing.
You want me to pass?
I do. This is a passage right at the end of the introduction. This is, in looking back, I realized that I've had the good fortune to absorb the events that transpired during my childhood years into my very being, as if no boundary exists between then and now, as if the past has not really passed. For some time I've had the urge to share that treasure trove, lest it vanish. In the pages that follow, I describe the effect of that decade on me as a young child and introduce you to those altogether decent, tough, eccentric people whose bravery, endurance, dedication, and resourcefulness influenced me during all the years that followed. I tell of a time, a place, and a way of life long gone, nearly forgotten by the world, but still indelible in my memory. It is my hope to resurrect them and to make them live again. So partly in response to the basic human instinct to share feelings and experiences, and partly for the sheer joy and excitement of it all, I report on my early life. It was quite a romp.
I want to do what we did on the last show. We'll go back to Virginia. That way our viewers get exposure to a number of books. In addition to the one that you've already done, would you take us through the others and give us the theme of each of the other books that you found very interesting to you to share today?
Okay. I think that I mentioned Tony Doerr. I know I did on the show about fiction, and he is, as I said, Idaho's writer-in-residence, and this is a part of his range, not only fiction but nonfiction. This is a book entitled Four Seasons in Rome, and the subtitle is On Twins, Insomnia, and the Biggest Funeral in the History of the World. And Tony Doerr was given a grant to spend a year in Rome writing and researching, and he took along his wife and their 6-month-old twin boys. And part of this adventure is he's struggling to write a book. He has insomnia. The Pope dies at this time, and he's trying to find diapers and baby food in Rome for these little babies. And wonderful account of how he weaves all that together. It's just a marvelous snapshot of his year in Rome. Then I've got here a book by Michael Beckschloss. As you mentioned, I'm the vice chair of the Idaho Humanities Council, and Michael Beckschloss is one of our speakers that will be in Boise.
Right.
And I know that he's written several books, and I chose his most recent one, Presidential Courage, and he follows the history of, I think, 5 or 6 presidents here, and how their bravery changed America from 1789 to 1989.
I was going to say that I've seen interviews with him on C-SPAN,
Yes,
and it's just very fascinating to hear him talk about those.
well, he is a remarkable scholar and such readable writing about these interesting men and things that you think you know about Washington and Lincoln and FDR and so on, and Reagan, that he brings to front and just focuses on the courage that it took them in light of major argument and animosity to some of their stands. And sometimes the footnotes are the most intriguing parts.
Another value there is for future leaders to learn from that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Then I have 2 books by the same author, and again, this came from my activities with the Idaho Humanities Council. The speaker here in Coeur d'Alene is Andrew Carroll, and these are powerful books. War Letters is a collection that was begun by him with the Legacy Project, where in 1998 had a goal of collecting Americans' letters from posterity. And through the Dear Abby column actually got a whole major portion of the letters. 50,000 of them came in from all over the country, and he's had 10,000 since that. And he organized it chronologically from the Civil War, World War I and II, Korea, the Cold War, Vietnam, and Persian Gulf. And interestingly, I went back and was reading some of the letters from World War II while the war, the PBS special by Ken Burns, is going on. And almost simultaneously, when I was rereading the section on the Normandy Beach invasion, I'm reading letters from soldiers. The research in this is phenomenal because the amount and pulling it together. By the way, as a side note, all the proceeds from this book go to veterans organizations. And so he not only does the research on where the letter came from, but what happened to the person who wrote it. And so I've spent a lot of Kleenexes reading these because they're very powerful and they're very moving. The other one that I have by him is a little different, although he, again, is a scholar on this one. This is called Operation Homecoming, sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts. He and several other writers, Bobby Ann Mason, Tobias Wolff, Richard Bosch, and some others, went around to various service bases in the United States, and they encouraged not only the currently serving soldiers, but some of their families to write about their view, and this is about Iraq and Afghanistan, so it's very timely. And it's just, it ranges from emails to letters, and there are some pieces of fiction here, some poems, some short stories, again, based on fact, and again, he tells the background of the author and what's happened to that person who might still be serving or came back home or whatever. And here again, pro bono work that he did for all of the editing of this and all of the teaching of these young people who are serving our country right now. So
What a remarkable summer thought you had, because that's just,
yes,
it's really revealing. And Denise, if you'll go through yours.
I'd like to. I'm going to start with this one by James Tabor called Forever on the Mountain. For those readers who loved Into Thin Air, I can't too highly recommend this book. This is a can't put down read. I've always thought mountaineers were crazy people, but I'm fascinated by, I'll read anything on mountaineering literature. And this book covers one of it was the worst catastrophe, mountaineering catastrophe in continental North America. It still is. 7 men died climbing Denali in 1967. There was an expedition headed up by a young man by the name of Joe Wilcox, and part of the expedition he supervised. These were men he'd climbed with, and then they were joined by men from Colorado, another who'd done some climbing but had not climbed with a primary group. And it was before the National Park Service had any experience.